Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Debate at the State, co-hosted by the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, the Maddy Institute, the UC Merced Center for Analytic Political Engagement, and media partner CAP Radio. My name is Joe Kita, and I'm the executive editor of the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. We are proud to be here tonight in front of a live audience at the historic State Theater in downtown Modesto. Our goal tonight is to provide a platform for an informed and engaging conversation between the two candidates vying to represent California's 13th Congressional District. The Central Valley is at the heart of many critical issues that affect our state and nation, from water and agriculture to housing, healthcare, and education. The decisions made by our representative in Congress will shape the future of our communities. That's why it's so important that we hear directly from the candidates tonight as they share their vision, their priorities, their plans to address the unique challenges that we all face. This debate is not just an opportunity for candidates Adam Gray and John Duarte to outline their positions. It's also a moment for all of us as engaged citizens to listen, learn, and reflect on who will best serve our incredible district. We're grateful to CAP Radio for partnering with us to bring this important event to the public, and we appreciate each of you here, both in person and tuning in at home, for participating in our democratic process. So without further ado, let's get started. Please join me in welcoming our moderators, Victor Patton, Kristen Lamb, and Brianna Vicari. These three journalists have lived and worked in the communities that encompass the 13th Congressional District and deeply understand the region's civic life. And when we decided to find moderators, we wanted to have local ones. Victor Patton is an accomplished journalist with an extensive experience covering business, government, and community issues. He is a veteran reporter in the Central Valley and currently serves as the editor-in-chief of the Merced Focus. Victor's deep understanding of the challenges facing our region, along with his commitment to holding those in power accountable, make him a valuable voice in today's discussion. Kristen Lamb is the local government reporter for Capital Public Radio, where she covers policy, governance, and housing issues in the region. She has worked with various news outlets across the state and also right here in Modesto, reporting on local politics and the impact of policy decisions on everyday life. Kristen's insightful coverage and expertise in government matters will help guide tonight's debate. Brianna Vicari is an investigative reporter for the Merced Focus and is known for her work on housing, homelessness, and local government. She has covered the Central Valley's most pressing issues and has a keen interest in the intersection of policy and community well-being. Brianna's reporting has shed light on critical topics that often go under the radar, and her expertise will play a key role in tonight's debate. Welcome, moderators. Let's greet them with a round of applause. Now, please join me in welcoming our candidates, Adam Gray and John Duarte. Please come up to the stage. Come on up. Adam Gray is a native of Merced and a longtime advocate for the Central Valley. He served in the California Assembly from 2012 to 2022, representing the 21st District. During his time in the Assembly, Adam is focused on key issues such as water infrastructure, healthcare, and economic development, working to bring more resources and attention to the needs of our region. He prides himself on building bipartisan coalitions to address complex challenges and is committed to fighting for the Central Valley in Congress. John Duarte is the incumbent congressman and a local business owner and farmer from Houston. As the president of Duarte Nursery, one of the largest family-owned nurseries in the country, he has firsthand experience with the agricultural issues that are central to the Central Valley's economy. John is running for re-election with a focus on protecting water rights, reducing government regulation, and promoting job growth. He is a strong advocate for the interests of farmers and small businesses and brings a fresh, practical perspective to the race for California's 13th Congressional District. Let's give our candidates a round of applause. So, before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to explain the rules for tonight's debate so that everybody understands the format. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to respond to each question. They will have the opportunity to present their full response without interruption. After both candidates have answered the question, there will be a 1-minute rebuttal period where each candidate can respond to points raised by their opponent. Our goal tonight is to maintain a fair and respectful debate, allowing each candidate to share their views on the issues that matter to all of us. We kindly ask that the audience refrain from applause, comments, or interruptions during the candidates' responses, so we can ensure that the debate flows smoothly and both candidates have an equal opportunity to be heard. Thank you for your cooperation, and let's get started. Victor Patton, Editor-in-Chief of the Merced Focus, has the first question. Victor?
Thank you, Joe. Both of you, at one time or another, have described yourselves as centrists in your respective parties. Congressman Duarte, you once told a town hall in Atwater that you would stand against the ultra-conservatives and the woke. Adam Gray, during your time in the state legislature, you established a reputation as a blue dog Democrat, willing to work across the aisle with Republicans. Given you are both moderates, what is the primary difference between you and your opponent?
Which of us would you like to speak to that first?
I think we skipped the coin flip.
There we go. Thank you for helping.
Who wants to call?
Go ahead, Adam.
Heads.
Okay, it is tails, so you want to go first or second?
I'll close.
Okay. All right, Adam.
Okay, well, thank you. Good evening. And first of all, thank you to our moderators and our sponsors. It's fabulous to be here. Certainly, I don't have to say that UC Merced is near and dear to my heart and my work, but also the Maddy Institute. Ken Maddy was an amazing Republican representative here in the Valley that was famous for crossing party lines. And certainly, this first question about our records in office, you know, I had the opportunity to run for the legislature in 2012, representing Merced County and Stanislaus County, and used that time to go up and fight for a region that I thought was underrepresented, that too often was overlooked, and that too often neither party had necessarily served our interests or had the right answers all the time. And during my 10 years in the legislature, that was the focus and certainly the spirit of most of my work. I founded the California Problem Solvers Caucus, which was a bipartisan caucus made up of equal Democrat and Republican members doing work and trying to break ground on compromise and consensus. I was the leader of the moderate Democrats. I worked with both my Democrat and Republican colleagues not only to pass good bills, but oftentimes to stop bad legislation on the assembly floor and in assembly committees. My record is what I would encourage voters to look at. Anybody and everybody at election time can claim they're a moderate. And you often see in competitive seats like this one that are oftentimes referred to as purple districts, both candidates will say, oh, I'm in the middle, I'm a centrist, I'm working with the other side. But I would encourage you to dig a little deeper and look at our actual record. Over 10 years, you'll find that my record has been consistent, that I have actually delivered working with Republicans, that I've been endorsed by other Republican elected officials throughout this district, like Sheriff Jeff Dirksen here in Stanislaus County and Sheriff Vern Warnke in Merced County. The record is what matters, not the rhetoric.
Okay. Thank you, Adam. Now, Congressman Duarte. And reminder, no applause, please. Thank you.
Easy out there. Yeah. So I'm first time in politics. I run for Congress in a seat that Joe Biden just won by 11 points. Is it about being a partisan? No. It's about looking at our communities here in the Central Valley and understanding what kind of strains are in our communities, what kind of duress Mendota's going under, how they've never had a federal program. Now they've got $5 million for roads. It's understanding how the farmers, for all the rhetoric about water bonds and everything else, don't have water. And we know that that's affecting our valley communities so much. And in the divisions in Congress back in DC, you're all worried about Heritage Action Project 2025. Well, I'm proud to tell you, Heritage Action considers John Duarte the lowest ranked Republican by every one of their standards. In the House of Congress, I have a voting record. It's only 2 years because I've been out there in the real world, running a business, creating jobs, raising a family. But when Heritage Action looked at it all, I didn't even know they had a rating until I looked at it. And I am the lowest ranked Republican in Congress. I do stand against the extremes of both parties. I want everyone to be who they are and love who they love. I want women to have choice. I want women to have freedoms. I want everyone to have freedoms and choice. But you know what I really want? I want the American dream alive. And I will bring that American dream back to life in this valley, working with local electeds. You want to talk about moderate? There's a Central Valley Leadership Roundtable. It's all the electeds down in the South Central Valley. It's got all the Democrats, the independents. They made an endorsement in this race. I am the first Republican the Central Valley Leadership Roundtable has ever endorsed. I'll stand against my party when that's what makes sense. I'll stand with my party when that makes sense, to get gas and groceries cheaper and to get life back on track here in the Central Valley for working families. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Duarte. And please hold your applause until we go to the debate, to the break. So, Adam, you have a minute to rebut.
Well, again, there's action and there's rhetoric. Congressman Duarte certainly sounds like a nice guy when he talks like that, and refers to the heritage this and the scorecard that. The first vote he cast when he got to Washington, D.C. was to empower a Republican leadership group that has literally, whether you watch Fox News, CNN, or MSNBC, brought us the most unproductive partisan Congress in American history. That's the record, and that's the fact. And so, it's good to have happy talk at election times. What's difficult is to stand there and vote against your own party when they're wrong. I've done it, and I know it.
Congressman Duarte, you have a minute to respond.
I think the night will be long enough.
Okay, so we will go on to the next question. Brianna Vicari, investigative reporter with the Merced Focus, has the second question. Brianna?
The state of California has made slow progress to improve water infrastructure in disadvantaged rural communities that often see failed wells, contaminated water, and depleted aquifers. What can you do in Congress to ensure these rural communities that often compete with the water needs of large agricultural operations have sustainable access to clean and affordable drinking water?
Congressman Duarte, you answer first. You have 2 minutes.
Sure. These rural communities have been down to Tranquility. Their water's brown. It's coming out of the ground. It's coming out of pipes. Their water's brown. It should be undrinkable. They don't have a choice. Out in Patterson, we got hexavalent chromium coming through the aquifer, and they've been dealing with that for years. They're doing wellhead treatment instead of bringing in surface water. We're not competing in agriculture with these rural communities. We are partners with these rural communities in delivering water abundance to that part of the state. We need to get treated water plants up and down the west side of the valley. It's not been done yet. We need to get it to Patterson. We need to get to Mendota, to Kerman, to Tranquility, to Firebaugh. We haven't done it. And where we do have treated water plants, like in Livingston, they're already overtapped and undersized and not meeting needs. Treated water plant costs $50 million. Should probably cost more than that now. The federal government, out of the administration, not by my choice, I'll tell you that, put $3.1 billion into the high-speed rail project out of the Transportation Infrastructure Jobs Act. Now, if you look at sewer plants, water treatment plants, expressways, overpasses on freeways, that is 62 $50 million projects that got funded into the boondoggle high-speed rail program that could have come to this valley instead and provided the infrastructure that we need. That is how we're going to get treated surface water to the valley. And then, as we're doing that, we've got to look at water supply. Gavin Newsom killed the biops that the previous administration put through that would have delivered abundant water south of the Delta. The Delta tunnels won't do it. I've got projects for dredging to increase channel flow and decrease flood releases. I've got projects to build the infrastructure that will bring the American River watershed down to the Clifton Bay Court Forebay for the south of Delta pumps. And I've got already challenged the Bureau of Reclamation to change the way they operate our reservoirs to increase the yield of water to cities and farms.
Thank you, Mr. Duarte. Mr. Gray?
Thank you for the question. Water couldn't be more critical to our region, both to communities that need clean drinking water and agriculture that needs the water to grow and produce the food that this nation eats. When I was in the state legislature, we worked with Governor Brown, bipartisan water bond that we passed in 2014 that had $3 billion in water infrastructure in it. But in the last half a century, we've grown our water supply here in California by less than 1%. That's unacceptable. We've made great strides in conservation. Dairies today use 90% less water than they used when I was a child. Communities, building, everything on the conservation side has been great strides, but we have not kept up with our infrastructure. And what we've gotten from the federal government is excuses and blame, right? I mean, even John's answer, with all due respect, it's like, well, we spent money on something else and I'm mad about that. Okay, well, why are we derelict in our duty in bringing the money to the water infrastructure projects so that communities can actually grow their water supply? California can grow its water supply. It's critical, and it's more critical here in the Valley than any part of the region. We've been overlooked. I worked with Democrats, Republicans, and independents in Sacramento to get us the money, and we need someone to go to Congress and actually get them back to work because they've not been able to pass a budget. They've not been able to balance a budget. They've not been able to move forward on issues other than a quarterly notice we see in the newspaper that the government might shut down because people can't agree or work together or find any kind of common ground and consensus. So we just need a wholesale change in Washington, D.C. in the way they're doing politics, and people that actually know how to work together, know how to compromise, and don't just play a game of trying to distract you with talk about other projects or blame other people.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Mr. Duarte, you have 2 minutes.
2 minutes? Okay.
Sorry, 1 minute to rebut.
Giving you
I'm
more
sorry.
response time, John.
That won't need it all. $14 billion water bond. $3 billion, and that's about $60 billion in water bonds that we've passed since the last dam was built here in California. $3 billion of it for infrastructure. Okay, that'd be nice. But the water bond that was passed by Adam here doesn't allow that infrastructure, the water from that infrastructure, to go to anything but public benefit water. Public benefit water isn't you. Public benefit water is more birds and more fish. There's no human consumption water funded by that water bond. Reservoirs being built with about $700 million out of the water bond. Klamath dams are being torn down on the river with hundreds of millions of dollars out of that water bond. But none of the water generated up at sites from that water bond is coming to a faucet or a farm near you or in this state. So be aware, we did not fund water for humans with the water bond.
Adam, you have 1 minute rebuttal.
Well, I mean, John said in his own words, we're building a new storage reservoir project here in California because of that water bond. And is that going to solve all our problems? Of course it's not. That's why we need the federal government to step in. The federal government has vastly greater resources than state government, and historically has always funded a major component of all these projects, and they just haven't been able to step up and do their job because we have gridlock and extreme partisanship in Washington.
All right, Victor has our third question. Victor?
Over the past 2 decades, California and the San Joaquin Valley has seen a new normal when it comes to climate and weather events. This new normal is dubbed climate whiplash. The state has seen its driest and most extreme years of drought, coupled with intense heat waves and wildfires. Those years were followed by short periods of warm, heavy rains that caused mudslides and flooding. What types of climate policies do you support that will protect families' homes, health, and livelihood?
Adam, you answer first. You have 2 minutes.
Well, first and foremost, we need people in office who actually acknowledge climate change as a problem and who acknowledge that we need the issue to be dealt with in a serious manner. You know, in California, we've led the nation in climate policy. We've implemented emissions reductions programs. We've funded those programs. We've worked hand in glove with agriculture to try take advantage of some of the byproducts of food production and biomass and create renewable energy and take real steps to invest in a future where renewable energy is a big piece of the energy pie and can help us reduce. I mean, the biggest contributors to climate change are energy and manufacturing. Those are the biggest contributors around the globe. And of course, here in a valley where we have the greatest and largest agricultural valley in the world, those are key parts of our economy. We've got to be serious about funding this transition to a clean energy world. And you know, in our first race, John said he was going to go to Washington, D.C. and vote against the Socialist Democrats and their green energy policies. I don't know if his position has changed in the re-elect, but that's just not the kind of rhetoric we need on this issue. It's an issue that's too critical to agriculture, to our communities, to our children and grandchildren.
Thank you, Adam. Congressman Duarte, you have 2 minutes.
Sure. That rhetoric, if you want to call it that, is based in science. If you're really concerned about climate change, if you're really, really concerned about CO2 emissions into the air, there's two things we could do. We could burn more natural gas, which is 1/3 as carbon intensive as coal or oil. We need to be transitioning to natural gas. That means we need an administration, leadership in Washington that wants to drill more gas wells and build the pipelines to make sure we're using more natural gas instead of coal and oil. That's American. We have 4 Saudi Arabias of natural gas under our feet right here in America, and we can produce it at under $30 a barrel of oil equivalent. Secondly, if we're really concerned about climate change, and I've kind of been chuckling on this one for a while, if we're really concerned about climate change, where in the heck is our nuclear energy policy? Why are we dialing down nuclear energy plants that make no carbon whatsoever? Right now here in this district, I go door to door. I did 4,000 doors last election cycle. I go door to door. I see the screen door closed in Mendota, in Kerman, and Firebaugh, out in Dos Palos. And I see the home in 105-degree temperatures in the summer are ventilating their home with natural ambient air because the family can't afford electricity at 47 cents a kilowatt. If you're living in the PG&E part of this district right now, energy costs you 47 cents a kilowatt. And that's not only a sad insult to working families who are barely getting by as it is because of high gas and grocery costs and all the taxes associated with that. It's because we're transitioning to power systems that don't deliver economic power. It's chasing residents out of California. It's pushing working families to the edge of privation. And it's killing wages and it's increasing the cost of living. So we've handled it very badly. If you believe in your soul that carbon needs to be taken out of the environment, talk to me about natural gas, talk to me about nuclear power, or explain to the working families in this district why you're selecting the least workable solutions and putting them on their backs.
Thank you, Mr. Duarte. Adam, you have 1 minute to rebut.
Well, I think he kind of made my point for me, so I don't know how much more I need to add, but I'll just say that, yes, it is rhetoric to talk about socialist Democrats and green energy policies, and frankly, it's misleading to suggest to people that we can't do both, that we can't walk and chew gum at the same time and have an affordable energy policy for Californians, but also invest in the energy of the future, which is going to be critical to the success of agriculture here in the Valley.
Thank you. We have time for an additional question before our break. Victor, you can ask this one.
Congressman Duarte, you've said you're moderate on abortion, and you voted for the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. Opponents said it was designed to intimidate health providers offering abortions. Adam Gray, you supported the 2022 state proposition adding abortion rights to the California Constitution. On the federal level, would you work to codify rights previously set under Roe v. Wade? Why or why not?
Congressman Duarte, you have 2 minutes to answer this question.
I'm pro-choice. I ran last time as pro-choice. I'm pro-choice this time. Born alive doesn't mean abortion to me. I've been pro-choice. I'm going to stay pro-choice. I'm the one of 2 Republicans in the entire Congress that voted against the Clyde Amendment. I protected the right of military women to be flown to a state that allows abortion when they're stationed, not by choice of their own, in a state that doesn't allow abortion. I was one of 2 Republicans there. Again, I'm the most moderate Republican in Congress, and I will stand by my record as being pro-choice.
Mr. Gray, you have 2 minutes.
Well, obviously, I did support and help to pass a constitutional amendment to protect choice here in California. But we need people in Congress who are willing to codify Roe v. Wade. What's happened in this country since the Supreme Court's decision, the women's lives we've seen put at risk in states around the country. The idea that John wants to present himself as pro-choice when he's endorsed by Californians for Life, a pro-life organization. I mean, do any of us actually believe that? It's just complete nonsense. What it is somebody who will say anything at election time to get elected in a district that he knows a majority of his constituents want to have those freedoms protected, right? So he's going to try to confuse us and say, oh, Donald Trump and I are pro-choice. He actually went on national TV to explain to us that Donald Trump and John Duarte were pro-choice. What pro-choice means, John, is that a woman's free to choose her own reproductive health care, regardless of what state she lives in. That's just a fundamental right. That's what I'm for.
Please,
I'll
no
codify Roe v.
applause.
Wade.
Please hold your applause. Congressman Duarte, you have a minute for rebuttal.
I'm pro-choice.
Adam, you have a minute for rebuttal.
Endorsed by Californians for Life, has suggested that he and John Duarte are pro-choice to muddle up the meaning of pro-choice. We should all be offended by this. There's nothing wrong with having a pro-life or a pro-choice position, but one should be clear and honest about it. And that's what we need in Washington, is people being honest about positions. If John wants to be pro-life or Californians for Life want to advocate for that position, that's fine. Say it and let voters decide what they want, but don't try to sucker people or mislead people into you having a position that you fundamentally don't have. And you voted dozens of times, not just to put doctors and nurses at risk, dozens of times in D.C. For anti-choice policies. I mean, this is just absurd.
And that concludes the first segment of tonight's debate. We've already heard some important perspectives from both candidates, and there's much more to come. For those of you listening on the radio, we're going to take a short break, but don't go anywhere. There's plenty more to discuss as we dive into key issues affecting California's 13th Congressional District. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this brief message. So we have 2 minutes, so this is going to happen pretty quickly, so don't go very far. I know we're all like really impassioned about this, but please hold your applause. It helps with the decorum of the debate, so we could hear all the answers. Thank you. How's it going? Joe, I'll get you a few right now. I'll get you a few right now. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Oh. All right, we have 1 minute. 1 minute until we return. Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us. If you're just tuning in, we're here at the debate for California's 13th Congressional District, where we've heard thoughtful responses from both Adam Gray and John Duarte on key issues affecting the Central Valley. There's still more to come, so let's jump right back into the debate. Our moderators are ready with the next round of questions. Victor, Kristen, Brianna, take it away.
The Merced region saw historic flooding in January 2023, and the farm worker community of Planada suffered devastating losses. Many Planada residents didn't qualify for federal aid because of their immigration status. Eventually, our current state lawmakers secured $20 million in state aid, but it still took over a year for residents to eventually apply for and receive any money. This first question is for Congressman Duarte. You had just been sworn into the House. What have you done since then to aid the Planada community as it continues to rebuild and worries remain over the upcoming winter?
I recall that. It was the first day I got back into the district as a newly sworn-in congressman after some theater. Vern Warnicki from Merced County gave me a call, and I went down to McSwain to actually get in. Fortunately, we were able to do it. I didn't know what being a congressman could pull off, but we got 2 or 3 Chinooks to drop sandbags on a broken levee there by McSwain and stop the flooding there. And then we went out to Planada a few days later. We found out that Planada had flooded 5 years earlier. In 2018, this same river overflowed and flooded Planada, flooded out the same schools, the same homes. The river had not been dredged in the 5 years. Jim Costa, who was the congressman there at the time, I looked at him and told him this. He said, I got the money, but the state fish and game agencies wouldn't let the river in Planada, I think it's Bear Creek, get dredged out to prevent flooding again. And so we've been working with the district. We've been getting more money through a community project grant and pressuring the Army Corps of Engineers fairly vociferously in several hearings to get the dredging done on Bear Creek. And you know what? It hasn't been done to this day. And these homes, they lost their furniture. I walked these homes, I walked these businesses, and it was disgusting. FEMA wasn't there. Under this administration, FEMA's been a complete failure. They did not deliver any relief to these families. Go for it. I've been there. I've seen these families out there in Planada throwing away their furniture in dumpsters after being flooded twice in 5 years in the same river because the regulatory agencies here in California wouldn't issue the permits to get the dredging done. We've got more money for dredging now. We're trying to get more money for relief. And you know, I feel for these families. We should not have requirements of residency for families who are flooded out in natural disasters. Humans here in our communities are humans here in our communities, and when they need relief to pull them from the edge of privation,
Thank you,
they need
Congressman
relief.
Duarte. Adam Gray, we have a slightly different question for you. One of your campaign advertisements claims you provided relief by cutting through bureaucratic red tape for the valley after devastating floods, but it doesn't specify when that was. You weren't in office in January 2023, so how and when did you help flood relief efforts?
So when I was in the legislature, we worked hand in glove with an organization called River Partners to do floodplain restoration. And, you know, we've got not only a problem of access to water supply, but we also have flooding issues that impact communities like Planada and others throughout the San Joaquin Valley and has historically done so. What we can do that both helps with our water supply issue and at the same time addresses the flooding is to put these natural floodplains and restore them off of our rivers all throughout the San Joaquin Valley. The state has invested about $50 million into this, both clearing bureaucratic red tape to accomplish it and at the same time fund about a dozen of these projects here in the San Joaquin Valley. The problem is we need so much more. And what you saw in John's discussion of the issue is we're just too focused in Washington with casting blame, right? It's the regulator's fault, it's somebody else's fault. You know, it's mind-blowing to me with this Congress that's literally been the most unproductive Congress in U.S. history that there's just no work ethic. Here in the San Joaquin Valley, people work really hard. We have incredible work ethic in agriculture, on farms, in and around our communities. And when somebody asks you to do something, you need to roll up your sleeves and get it done. But what people want to do is have misdirection, blame someone else, give you all the reasons the job's not done. Well, what we proved in California, working with these nonprofit organizations like River Partners, is you can both protect us from flooding, restore the natural habitat, protect the environment, and recharge our underground aquifers, which gives us more water supply in tough years. So there is innovative work that can be done when people stop casting blame and making excuses.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. This question is for both candidates. What would both of you do in Congress to ensure residents who suffer from natural disasters can qualify for and receive aid more quickly? Congressman Duarte, please answer first.
Well, I just touched on it at the end there. Disaster aid in our communities needs to be focused to all members of our communities. We need to make sure that families working and living here in California, if they're hungry, if they're dispossessed of their homes, if their cars have been flooded, if their jobs are no longer available to them, if their schools are shut down, they need disaster aid benefits. And this nonsense coming out of FEMA, as we saw recently, and I'm not sure it isn't a long-standing policy, that if you're not here with documentation or papers or whatever, you can't get aid when in time of disaster, is an inhuman policy. It's not fair, it's not reality-based, and it puts families in very, very bad situations, and it needs to be changed immediately.
Adam?
Well, first of all, every member of our community, regardless of their status, should have access to these resources in an emergency. We need to look out for every American living here contributing to our society. But what we really need is people in Washington paying attention to some of this bureaucratic mess John's talking about. My first 2 years in the state legislature, I had the honor of chairing a committee, the Joint Legislative Audit Committee. We actually went in and did audits on state agencies and looked at bureaucratic process and tried to find where are the pitfalls and how can we make improvements. Well, Washington, D.C. has the same committee. You never hear about their work because they're too busy doing some ridiculous partisan exercise like Hunter Biden investigations or some other nonsense, and they're not focusing on the actual work that needs to get done of making these agencies work better.
Congressman Duarte, you have a minute for rebuttal.
I don't need a minute. I just want to know, did the audit agency find $60 billion in a budgetary shortfall, or $70 billion in a budgetary shortfall, or $20 billion in a social budgetary shortfall in Sacramento this last year? Because it doesn't look to me like anyone's auditing anything up there.
Adam, you have a minute for rebuttal.
Well, I'll just say that the 7 out of the 10 years that I served in Sacramento, not only did we have a balanced budget and on-time budget and one with a surplus. John wouldn't know much about those things because Congress hasn't seen one in decades and certainly hasn't gotten closer with his help.
Thank you. Brianna Vicari has our next question. Brianna?
Finding housing that's affordable is a constant challenge for Valley residents. The average price of a home in Merced is just under the national average, but in a county where the average household income is around $66,000 annually, few can afford that. As a member of Congress, what can you do to improve affordability for Valley homebuyers? Let's hear from Congressman Duarte.
Housing here in the Valley just costs way too much, and young families are very, very challenged to even think about buying a home, and we're not building that many. So some things that go in the cost of housing. Water availability. If we don't have water delivered to the communities up and down the valley, we can't build homes. You can't build homes until you can prove a source of water, a 50-year source of water. So water scarcity is hurting our farms, it's hurting our current residents health-wise, but it's also hurting the prospect of ever owning a home for many people in the state, and especially on the west side of the valley here. Infrastructure. When we don't spend money on the infrastructure, the highways, the expressways, the water plants, all that money has to be loaded into developer fees on housing, and it gets paid for by new housing, and it drives up the cost of new housing, tens of thousands of dollars to pay for that infrastructure. So that's why I'm so passionate about moving infrastructure dollars from silly projects to projects that actually make housing more affordable and life more easy for residents here in the valley. And then after that, it's requirements. If you want to build housing here in the valley, you've got to put solar panels on it. You build a 1,300 square foot single family starter home, and it needs to have fire sprinklers put in it. You've got to pay an air board fee in the tens of thousands of dollars per house because of the impacted air basin we're in here. These are all cost drivers coming out of Sacramento that need to go away so that we can get back to affordable housing here in the valley. So there's a lot of solutions, but it means a lot less government, a lot less bureaucratic requirements, a lot more use of our natural resources, and a lot better spending of our infrastructure dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duarte. Mr. Gray, you have 2 minutes.
Look, housing is a critical issue. It's the biggest line item for most families in their household budget, right? Rent or mortgage. And housing, not just here in California, but throughout the entire country, has been underproduced. We build roughly 125,000 housing units, new doors, each and every year here in California. We have an undersupply of about 4 million homes. We need a major renaissance of building, and it involves the government investing in infrastructure. You know, this is somewhere where the federal government could actually step in and pay for some of this infrastructure that's desperately needed to make the building of housing more affordable and lower the cost. But most importantly, we need to increase the supply to a place where we can actually not have such dramatic increases in the price of housing. In Sacramento, we actually did work to deal with some of the NIMBYism issues, trying to streamline permits at the local level to get more housing out there. But we've got to have that investment of infrastructure. And beyond that, we got to find the workforce. And this is one of the reasons Congress getting off their tail and actually doing immigration reform is so critical. We need workforce. You talk to anybody in the construction industry, we don't have the workers. We don't have the electricians, the plumbers, the carpenters to actually build those, million homes a year we need to build to actually bring that supply under control. And so we need to be encouraging folks. You know, I did my part to work here locally in Stanislaus County to bring money to support Volt Institute, which is actually training workers here in Stanislaus County. But we need to do so much more. I mean, we need programs in our high schools. We need apprenticeship programs. We really need to support a lot more young people getting into these professions. And we need to allow people that want to come here from other countries, be a good citizen, work and contribute and do something for their family, the opportunity to do so. But we've got a federal government that's more interested, again, in blaming others. It's this regulation, it's that. Tons of excuses and tons of reasons nothing can get done, but no action.
Thank you.
And that's the problem.
Congressman Duarte, you have a minute for rebuttal.
Well, I'm glad Adam brought up immigration. Today, I'll just touch on this. I introduced an immigration bill, and it's going to make both parties upset. I tied border security and safe and verifiable elections to a full amnesty program who've been here for families who've been here 5 years or more living in the shadows. We've got a DACA fix in my immigration bill. We've got a guest worker program in my immigration bill. It's the Border Security and Immigration Reform Act. I filed it today. It's taking good elements from things that will push both sides of the aisle to their limits, but it's the immigration bill that we've needed to do for decades. We haven't done it since 1986. I'm pushing the candidates running for president. I'm pushing my colleagues in Congress to get on board, make the compromises we all need, and get across the line an immigration bill. If this bill would have been passed 5, 10, 15 years ago, America would be a safer, stronger country today. So I think this is something Adam and I probably agree on.
Thank you. Adam, you have a minute for rebuttal.
Well, I mean, a week to go for John's first re-election after we elected him 2 years ago. I'm glad he finally introduced an immigration reform bill. But this is exactly the lack of seriousness I'm talking about. Right? We don't need immigration reform bills at election time. We need people to sit down and do the tough work. The U.S. Senate attempted to do some of this tough work this last year. Many of you may have seen it and read about it. There was a bipartisan immigration border security bill that was supported by the Border Patrol agents, that was supported by some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, as well as some of the Democrats. And the minute the Republican Party bosses said, hey, all you Republicans better walk away from this, John went on TV and said he didn't support it. So he's been all over the map on this. He voted against H.R. 2, holds that up as a badge of courage for voting against his Republican colleagues, but then later he votes for it. And then when we have an actual consensus compromise bill, he's nowhere to be found.
Thank you, Adam. Kristen Lamb has our next question. Kristen.
After accounting for inflation, the median income has fallen since 2021 in the Merced, Modesto, and Fresno metro areas. Meanwhile, food prices rose by 28% in 5 years. In Congress, how will you work to ensure Valley residents can afford to put food on the table? We'll hear from candidate Gray first.
Could you repeat that question?
In Congress, how will you work to ensure Valley residents can afford to put food on the table?
Look, we need serious investment. We've got nearly 10% unemployment. I know in Merced County and many of the Valley counties have suffered from historic high unemployment, and we need the kind of investments that bring good jobs into the Valley and more jobs, right? That's why I worked the entire 10 years I was in the state legislature to grow and support UC Merced, one of our hosts this evening through their political science department. We have got to raise the education attainment level in this valley, and we've got to spur new industries, right? The old dairy supply company that my family ran in Merced, California, the business is no longer there, but my father still has the building and actually rents it to a company that hires UC Merced trained engineers to create solutions for harvesting equipment. It's incredible to walk in there and see that. Good paying jobs that come from that university. We are working with nonprofits and our local governments to actually create incubators for folks to start new industries and new opportunities, all the time taking advantage of this great agricultural valley and the wonderful agricultural industry that we already have. But we've got to do more. You can't have 9% unemployment in some of these counties. It's just unacceptable, and too many families are struggling.
Congressman Duarte, you have 2 minutes.
Sure, and thank you. We see it all over the valley. I talk to my interns who are working on my campaign and walking doors for me. I sit down with them and converse with them. We literally have families in the valley here who are having carbohydrates for dinner most nights, and then when the payments or the wages come in, they get a little bit of meat, produce, and protein on their dinner plates. We have families throughout America right now. It's probably the first time in American history where families are taking produce and protein off their dinner plates and moving towards a starch diet because they simply can't afford the diversity and the nutrition that they could afford 10 years ago. This is purely disgusting. And it comes down to we're not driving the economy for efficiency. I passed the Supply Chain Improvement Act just to make sure the infrastructure dollars that are put in the Transportation Infrastructure Jobs Act go to actually improving the supply chain, getting food from the farm to the processor, to the grocery stores, with the right infrastructure assets that actually make our economy run efficiently. We're not getting water on the farms. And when we talk about energy, and I like my cheap energy and others like their windmills and solar panels, that equals inflation. When energy costs more, when we don't drill American oil, we end up spending more on everything we do in our lives. And it's unfair to working families to be pushed against the edge of privation because someone in a bigger, fancier place has some sentiments about solar panels instead of natural gas and nuclear power. We can solve carbon. If that's what you want to solve, we can solve it. But let's not do it on the backs of families that are already so stretched. Let's not raise gas and food taxes. We've raised gas taxes too much. And you know what we're not doing? We're not building the freeway lanes. These people deserve to find a better job. We're chasing companies out of California. Cost of living and affordability has two big pieces: the price of goods and your wages. And when your price of goods are going up because we're not running our economy efficiently, and companies are leaving because we're not running our economy efficiently, we've got to change things, and that's what I'm in Washington, D.C. to do.
Thank you. Adam, you have 1 minute for rebuttal.
Look, we need serious investment in our healthcare infrastructure, in our transportation infrastructure. Most of what John has said here tonight is let's reduce regulation, let's cut taxes, let's have less investment in the valley, let's drill more oil. You know, there's a Republican governor in Wyoming who has an all-of-the-above energy policy, where they're actually pursuing wind, solar, nuclear. And we need innovative, forward-thinking people, not people trying to confuse us with a bunch of nonsense that, you know, we can just continue to do everything the way we've done it and that every regulator is to blame for every problem. There are certainly regulatory problems and we need to hold them accountable. We need serious people in Congress willing to compromise, work together, and actually focus their attention on these problems, not just blame others.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Congressman Duarte, you have a minute for rebuttal.
I'm good.
All right. Next question. Brianna will ask it. Go ahead, Brianna.
California voters this election can weigh in on a proposition that would enshrine same-sex marriage in the state constitution. Meanwhile, the Republican Party platform adopted over the summer says, quote, Republicans will promote a culture that values the sanctity of marriage, unquote. What is your stance on federal marriage equality policy?
Adam, you have 2 minutes.
I support equality and think that the federal government will have a policy just like we've protected and passed here in California to allow any Californian to marry whomever they choose and live the life that they choose to live.
Congressman Duarte?
Yeah, I have 4 children, and the most important thing I want for each one of them is find somebody great in this world to be married to and have a family with. And I want them to find whatever great person they like. And you know what I don't want? I don't want any of my 3 daughters marrying a guy that doesn't like girls. I want same-sex marriage available, protected, enshrined, respected, and celebrated every day. I couldn't support it more, and I'm proud to stand by it. My family changed churches because we got wrapped around the axle of that. At one church we moved to another church, and our kids were all very young. I've stood by this before it was cool. I stood by this before the Supreme Court, and we were strong on this before 2008 when the whole initiative went down. This is an obvious one to me, and we need to not only move forward, we need to celebrate that we've gotten here.
Adam, you have 1 minute for rebuttal.
Well, certainly this is one that John and I obviously agree on. I'd love to see his Republican Party also join us in trying to help protect marriage equality at the federal level.
Please hold your applause.
I must be a moderate.
All right. Did you have a minute if you want, Congressman. Anything else?
God bless same-sex marriage.
Okay. All right. So, and that wraps up our second segment of tonight's debate. We've covered some critical topics, and there's still more ground to cover as we continue this important discussion. For our radio listeners, we'll take another short break now, but don't go away. We'll be back shortly with more from the candidates on the issues that matter most to our community. Stay tuned.
Well, I'm getting close though. 40
Oh, well, that's getting there here. All right.
Welcome back, and thanks for rejoining us. We're here at the debate for California's 13th Congressional District, and we've already heard some insightful exchanges between Adam Gray and John Duarte. There's still plenty more to discuss as we move into the final portion of tonight's debate. Let's get back to the questions. Victor, Kristen, Brianna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joe. This is a question submitted by a reader of the Merced Focus. Many people worry about the viability and future of Social Security and Medicare. Congressman Duarte, what will you do to protect those programs for future generations?
I will protect those programs for future generations. No, Social Security and Medicare have trust funds. Those trust funds, if we don't get together and take on a bipartisan approach and co-own it, are going to go broke somewhere in the early 2030s. So what needs to be done is the Republicans and Democrats need to get in a room, not in the Problem Solvers Caucus, but in the senior members of the Republican and Democratic Party, Senate and House, need to go into a room on a bipartisan, bicameral Social Security and Medicare Commission and make decisions as to how we are going to realistically make sure these programs are sustainable going into the future. And then we need leadership in Washington, D.C. at the highest level who's actually going to take the recommendations of this commission. Does anyone remember Simpson Bowles? This is what we did decades ago. If we'd have done it then, we could have made little nips and little tucks and we could have been fine today. But they came out with their recommendations, and the Simpson Bowles recommendations were thrown away by that current administration. Won't use names. But if we don't do this, and we've been staring at this asteroid heading for Earth for 30 years, if we don't do this, these trust funds are going to go bankrupt, and Social Security and Medicare benefits are going to be cut, and that is completely unacceptable. I am strongly in favor of a bipartisan commission where we get together and make the hard decisions and come out and co-own them in a bipartisan effort to save both these important entitlement programs.
Thank you, Congressman. Mr. Gray?
Look, protecting Social Security and Medicare is an absolute 100% line in the sand, right? We cannot have people who've been made a promise for their security in their elderly years not receive what they paid for. And it's the responsibility of Congress to deal with that. John and the Republican leadership that he voted to install in Washington, D.C., has multiple times voted to make broad-based slashes to Social Security and Medicare and every other government program. And they've not done any of the serious work. I mean, the problem solvers that we talk about in Washington, D.C., haven't even met in over a year, because the Republican problem solvers are mad at the Democratic problem solvers for not electing Kevin McCarthy Speaker. I mean, this is the kind of silly nonsense that's going on in Washington, D.C. And the few votes that they've accomplished, and again, what's been the most unproductive session in U.S. history, have been to slash things like Social Security and Medicare, and John has supported them. I'd have a lot easier time buying the line that I'm standing up to my own party had he stood up and said, no, we're not going to make those cuts.
Congressman Duarte, you have a minute for rebuttal.
Let's look at 2020 to 2022. America spent, in complete Democrat control, America spent almost $10 trillion in additional spending, the Inflation Reduction Act, Build Back Better, all pieces of the New Green Deal. With those trillions, we could have saved Social Security and Medicare, but we didn't do it. Why didn't we do it? Why did we spend all that money, the CHIPS Act, $250 billion? Why didn't we put that money towards saving Social Security and Medicare? Why don't we rescind some of that money and save Social Security and Medicare?
Adam, you have a minute to respond.
Well, I'll note that John doesn't bring up the massive tax cuts they've given to some of the wealthiest people in this country, which is an obvious place to start. We don't need to get into all, we can just start there. Let's reverse those tax cuts. And then let's, again, sit down in a bipartisan fashion and make the tough decisions around revenue and spending. But let's do it knowing that we are going to have bipartisan agreement. We are not going to cut Social Security and Medicare for any American. That is money folks earned, and we need to keep our commitments.
Thank you. Brianna has her next question.
The price per gallon for gas in California is consistently higher than the rest of the country. Adam Gray, you have faced criticism for your support of SB 1 in 2017, which increased gas taxes. Governor Gavin Newsom recently signed legislation aimed at preventing gas prices from spiking, but opponents have said more regulations and fees aren't the answer. Candidate Gray, as a member of Congress, what will you do to help give Valley residents a break at the pump?
Well, look, we need to continue energy production in this country at high levels. Something that doesn't get talked a lot about, I haven't heard John say it tonight, is that the Biden administration actually has had more energy production than any administration in history. Nobody talks about it. John says drill, drill, drill. Well, they are drill, drill, drilling, and we're still having expensive energy, which is why we have to widen our investments there across the board. When I was in the legislature, we did pass the Infrastructure Act with Governor Brown, which was a bipartisan infrastructure act, exactly what I'm talking about tonight, working across the aisle, bringing people together. Roads were in disrepair here. Transit needed investment. California had the courage to step up and do that. I also introduced a bill that the Republicans later copied from me and have now reintroduced multiple times to give a gas tax holiday to Americans during a very difficult economic time. But I did it by using some of the surplus funds that we had in state government to continue to pay for our roads and bridges and make sure things are getting built. This is the problem. You got to pay as you go, and you got to have responsible budgeting, and Washington, D.C. just seems incapable of it, and I don't think they're going to do anything to lower the price of gasoline in California. I think we're going to have to forge forward and change the leadership back there and get people who are serious about sitting down and solving these difficult problems.
Thank you. Congressman Duarte?
Oh, we raised gas taxes. Adam helped raise gas taxes. SB 1. How many lanes on Highway 99? Same numbers were there in 1960s. How many lanes on Highway 5? Same number were there in 1960s. We haven't built lanes on our highways. We did a 5-year transportation improvement job right in the middle of Merced, right down your hometown. Had it 5 years, divided traffic. I felt like Luke Skywalker trying to blow up the Death Star every time I drove between the cement barriers. And it was all done. I was like, oh my God, it's all done. This is great. Now let's see what we got. They widened the shoulder. They didn't increase lanes. I mean, so if you're going to raise gas taxes, let's at least increase lanes. If you're going to criticize the federal government for not putting money into highway, why don't we challenge California's policy of no capacity increase? And that's coming out of Sacramento, and it's causing us to be stuck in brake lights every time we try and go to work. You try and go to the Bay Area, you try and get a job a little bit, you're in soul-crushing traffic because we're raising gas taxes. Why? Because we got a deal where Ace Commuter Express is going to come to Merced and Modesto someday, maybe, but that's what we got for that. But meanwhile, we're stuck in traffic and we can't find a better job down the road a little ways because we have soul-crushing traffic on the way home and on the way to work. This is nuts. We need to, if we're going to collect gas taxes, we need to build residents the streets they deserve and they pay for in those gas taxes. We're not doing it. It's a joke.
Thank you, Congressman. Adam, you have 1 minute for rebuttal.
Well, it's been a bit of a theme tonight, but this is the problem with John just not being honest about policy issues. We talk about bipartisanship. We talk about work with folks. I've done it. We passed a bipartisan infrastructure act. That's what John's referring to as the gas tax. That has invested billions of dollars, not just into this district, but throughout California to improve our roads. That's what responsible governing is. Not blaming everybody else and having every excuse under the sun as to why we can't get anything done. And it's never about, well, the federal government should step up and pay their part and help us with infrastructure, invest in our roads, invest in our transit. That's what we need to see in Congress, is not this constant, oh, it's some other project, it's misdirection. It is so tiring, and I know every resident here in the San Joaquin Valley who works hard every day is just looking to get a Congress that works as hard as they do and tries to accomplish things and solve problems, not blame others for their problems. And that's the fundamental problem with the politics. It's broken in Washington, D.C. right now. They refuse to step up and do the kind of work I did with the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act.
Thank you. Congressman, you have a minute for rebuttal.
I think we've turned this one over. That's okay. It'll be fine.
Kristen has our next question.
Many Californians and Valley residents are frustrated by the progress or lack thereof on the high-speed rail project. This project has turned out to be a much heavier lift than voters anticipated more than a decade ago, when roughly $10 billion in bonds were approved for the project. If the bullet train is ever built out from LA to San Francisco as originally planned, it could cost well over $100 billion. Where do we go from here now that California is knee-deep in spending billions with no bullet train to show for it?
Congressman Duarte, we'll hear from you first. 2 minutes.
Oh, please. Yeah, this is the most obvious, hopeless boondoggle nationally. I don't think there's I'm on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, and we talk about a lot of boondoggles. This is the biggest one in the country. It's making California a joke. Remember, every time we spend $1 billion on that bullet train, that's 20 $50 million projects we're not improving our communities with. That's 20 sewer plants. That's 20 water plants. That's 20 highway interchanges. That's 20 express lanes that we're not building. That's all infrastructure that we so desperately need. I went out to the Dos Palos wastewater treatment plant. They're building a new water treatment plant, but the wastewater treatment plant might as well not exist. It's corroded. It's not operational. The state won't give them a review and tell them that they're not operational, not meeting standards, because then they would have to prioritize them for a new wastewater treatment plant, and they don't have the money for that because we're building the high-speed rail. You know what the third biggest source of CO2 into the atmosphere is? You got energy and transportation, those are the two biggest. And number 3 is the curing of concrete. If you look at the carbon footprint of that high-speed rail project alone, it's a hopeless hoax. It's a source of more carbon than what we've offset here in California in 17 years. That project needs to go away, and we need to put money. We're driving electric cars, we're driving more efficient cars, we're improving our transportation in so many ways. If we build the infrastructure that actually meets our needs going forward and shut down that high-speed rail, residents in this valley, working families in this valley will lead better quality lives, and our environment will be safer from such a waste of resources and a waste of impacts on our climate. So I am totally ready to shut down the high-speed rail program and leave it there to laugh at and warn us of future government boondoggles.
Thank you, Mr. Duarte. Mr. Gray, you have 2 minutes.
We need people in Congress that are serious about solving problems, and investing in public transportation is important. Now, having a project that's over budget and delayed years is unacceptable. And we ought to have the people doing the oversight work, just like I talked about earlier with the Joint Legislative Audit Committee here in California. The federal government ought to be doing the oversight work. And John would lead you to believe that if somehow he votes against some high-speed rail money coming to California, that money is then all of a sudden going to be spent on some road that he wants built, or this, that, and the next thing. What happens is other states take the money. The project is moving forward. It needs to be brought under budget, it needs to be brought under control, and it needs better management. And we ought to be sitting down and doing the hard work to figure out how that's going to be accomplished, not just simply pretending that somehow that money is going to be reallocated to some other project. At the same time, we ought to be building water infrastructure. We ought to be investing in our roads, like we did with SB1, which you say you wouldn't have voted for. I mean, I've seen you at ribbon cuttings celebrating the infrastructure from the very Infrastructure Act that you said you would have opposed in the last election. I mean, it's absurd.
Mr. Duarte, you have a minute for rebuttal.
I'm okay.
Adam, you have a minute.
I'm good. I think we've got this one.
Okay, we'll move on to the next question, and Kristen is going to ask that one. Go ahead, Kristen.
You both support a pathway to citizenship for Dreamers, as well as improving the process for people to legally immigrate, especially when seeking agricultural work. But many bipartisan efforts on immigration have failed to gain traction, including the Farm Worker Modernization Act. Additionally, illegal border crossings have become a hot topic nationwide, especially as Central and South Americans flee their home countries. How can Congress effectively address what is widely accepted as a broken immigration system?
Mr. Gray, you have 2 minutes to answer this question.
The first thing we have to do is we have to challenge the rhetoric on the extreme partisan positions. You know, we've got a leader of one party who chooses to say things like immigrants poison the blood of America, that chooses to call the greatest country on earth the garbage can of immigration. This is the kind of rhetoric that makes bringing people together very, very difficult. And on the flip side, we can't pretend that simply addressing the situation the Dreamers are facing here in the United States, and that folks who are undocumented, working hard, contributing every day, a pathway to citizenship, those are all parts of the solution. But we need actual immigration reform that addresses quotas and deals with people being able to get work visas and green cards and participate in the vast amount of economic activity and jobs that we need help on, that we frankly don't have the workforce, like housing, like agriculture. And so we need people that are willing to, you know, turn the rhetoric down and stand up to the party leaders. And as I said earlier this evening, we had the toughest immigration, border security reform bill, the most progress that's been made in decades, with a bipartisan support out of the US Senate, and everybody walked away from it, right? Because Washington is more concerned with following the party leaders. When I was in Sacramento, I stood up against the Republicans and the Democrats. I had the courage, when I thought the Democrats were wrong on water policy, to say so and actually work to stop bad bills on the assembly floor. That takes courage and work. This business of saying we're moderate election times and introducing immigration reforms, you know, 7, 8 days before an election after I've been sitting around for 2 years, it's just not enough, guys. We need serious people in Washington doing serious work.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Congressman Duarte, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I've been sitting down with mayors up and down the district, up and down the valley. Several of them are here, Democrat mayors that are endorsing me. I know Maria Pacheco's here, CC, you're here, Gallegos. And I've gotten their endorsements, both through the Central Valley Leadership Roundtable as well as individually. It's on my website. We'll go through that. But I take it very serious. I'm down there sitting face to face with them and saying, okay, we know we've got to secure the border. And that's very popular. Not half-baked border security that came out of the Senate, but real H.R. 2 border security. And the reason I voted against H.R. 2 the first time was it had an E-Verify clause in it that would have pushed working families so far into the shadows. The same families we need to be bringing out of the shadows and give full access to the American dream, it would have had a biometric E-Verify in it. I told my party I'd vote against it. I was one of 2 Republicans to vote against that bill. I voted against it. When it came back to the floor again later in the session, I was able to support it. You know why? Because I'd stood up to my party and the E-Verify language was taken out of it. And my party took it serious when I told them that this isn't going to work for my families in the Central Valley, that it would hurt our communities. Now they believe me. And so I love standing up to my party. I stood up to both parties today. I put a bill out that's got pieces that both sides hate. But you know what? I love the fact that we're going for a compromise. I love the fact that we can improve lives here in the Valley just by having immigration reform. Right now, Hispanic voters are moving from one party to the other. Who knows where it lands? But the goal of my bill is to show Hispanic voters their power in this Hispanic Voting Rights Act district that I represent, and make sure that their voice is heard when the time is critical and when the candidates need to look at them and take them very serious. That's why I introduced the border security plan today, and that's why I'll be on the news this weekend. That's why I've been doing interviews all day long. We are going to make it happen. If I have to blow some stuff up to get there, we're going to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Duarte. Mr. Gray, you have 1 minute to respond.
So it was said earlier tonight that there's a razor-thin margin in Congress, and that this race and the discussion we're having tonight could literally impact who controls the House of Representatives and which party has control. Throughout this past 2 years, there have been multiple occasions where the margin, the difference between the Democrat and the Republican Party was as little as 1 vote, which meant that in those moments, John could have joined with his Democratic colleagues and actually done some of these things he claims to want to do. There were 18 different occasions where there were petitions to bring bills straight to the floor because the extreme Republican leadership wouldn't let it happen. John didn't sign one of them. I stood up to my party was kicked off committees, was punished by party leaders for actually drawing a line and saying, you're not going to take our water and you're not going to attack agriculture and our water rights here in the San Joaquin Valley. That's what real courage is. It's not just these talking points at election time.
Thank you. Mr. Duarte, you have a minute.
It's all good.
Thank you. All right, our next question will be asked by Victor Patton.
It's estimated that more than 65% of voters in the 13th Congressional District have Latino heritage. While Latino voters are by no means a monolith, they are definitely a political force that is becoming more active in California politics. With that in mind, why should Latino voters in particular choose you over your opponent?
Congressman Duarte, you have 2 minutes.
Well, we've discussed immigration, I think, at length now, so I'll put a marker on that one for an answer to this question and move on to other things I think are of general interest to all of us. We have immigrant families that have come to this nation for generations, for hundreds of years. And they've come for the American dream, to work, to get ahead, to see Americans' providence through its bounty, its resources. And what we've been doing lately in America is we've been abandoning our resource. I call it resource abandonment. We're abandoning our water. We're abandoning our farmland. We're causing valley fever down in the Central Valley. I just did a valley fever bill because we're not farming our lands and lungs are getting infected with funguses that cause long-term respiratory illness. We're abandoning our forests and letting our forests burn rather than harvest them. We've got logging opportunities. We've got sawmills we should have up in these forests. These forests could provide the lumber that get down the price of housing. We've got oil fields that need to expand. Yeah, they're operating well now because they were all permitted 5-10 years ago. Right now, we're not issuing the permits to sustain our energy to keep this economy going forward. So resource abandonment is closing the door on the American dream for new immigrant families that want the same opportunity that my family had when we came here from Switzerland or Portugal. And it's not just because they're Hispanic families, that's just where a lot of the more recent immigrants are from. And we need to make sure that we're all partners in freedom and partners in the American dream. And so, I don't care if I'm helping one party or ticking off another one. I really don't mind. I'm here to represent working families in this district to make the best choices possible. Sometimes that aligns with my party. Sometimes that doesn't align with my party. I don't really care. I was a nurseryman 2 years ago. I'll be a nurseryman 2 years from now. Maybe I'll be in Congress for a few more years. And while I'm in the House of Representatives, I am going to go to the mat to make sure the door to the American dream stays wide open in the United States for new families coming here for the American dream.
Thank you. Adam, you have 2 minutes.
Look, I think the Latino community here in the Valley, like many of our immigrant communities, this really truly is a valley of immigrants, whether you're Mexican-American, Latino-American, Portuguese, Dutch, Indian. People have come here from all over the world to work hard and earn an opportunity, and they want safe communities. I'm endorsed by our law enforcement leaders. Why? Because I ask them when I'm voting on important law enforcement policy. John could have asked the border agents when they were supporting an immigration compromise bill why they're supporting it and maybe help them get it done. People want good education. That's why I've worked so hard to bolster our community colleges, doubled the per pupil spending in our Valley schools to make sure our schools are treated more fairly, invested in UC Merced, brought a medical school to UC Merced so that we can improve our health care, support our community colleges so we can train more nurses and actually provide that health care that people desperately need. And job opportunities, investing things like Volt Institute and incubators that are going to create new industries and finding ways to take byproducts from agriculture and turn it into energy production that can actually create jobs here in the Valley. These are the kind of real policies as to why the Latino community and every other community ought to send someone to Congress who's going to be serious about the work and not just spend the days telling stories and blaming others and having excuses. I mean, that's what we have right now is a Congress that just, frankly, doesn't do any work and give us excuses.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Mr. Duarte, you have a minute.
Think we're out? Let's go.
Mr. Gray, you have a minute for rebuttal.
I'll move to the next question.
Okay, so we are at that point where we are closing argument time. So we want to thank both of you, our candidates, for sharing your views tonight. As we approach the end of this debate, it's time for both of you to make your final case to the voters. So we're going to give each of you 2 minutes for a closing statement. This is your opportunity to leave with final thoughts and why you believe you're the best suited to represent the 13th Congressional District. And I believe we did not do a coin flip on this one, so we probably should right now to figure out.
We did do a coin flip.
We did a coin flip, I think, to make sure
way.
who did the opening question, but we didn't do a coin flip to determine which candidate wants to go last for this. So whoever wins this coin flip will have the last say in the closing statement. So I'll go ahead and flip the coin right now. Who wants to call it?
I'll call it this time. Heads.
All right, it's tails. So Adam, you win. Do you want to go last?
I'll go last, yeah.
Okay, so Congressman Duarte, you have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. Thank you, the UC Merced Institute. Thank you, the McClatchy Foundation. Thank you to the Maddy Institute. And thank all of you who care enough as citizens to come and join us tonight and watch this debate. And thank Adam. Thank you, Adam, for being here tonight. This is what Congress is for. I was born here in Modesto. I raised my family here in Modesto. I built a business here in Modesto, here in the Central Valley. And since I've become your congressman, after knocking on 4,000 doors, getting to know you, going down, sitting in your city halls, talking to you as mayors, talking to your mayors, your city councils, I've understood. My first line to any new representative I meet as their congressman is, you think of me, please, as a waiter. I am here to help you improve your community by getting you whatever I can get you from the federal government to do that. We've been delivering a dispatch center with $3.5 million here to Modesto. We've worked on the HIDA bill, the high-intensity drug trafficking area bill, to get $309 million into the Central Valley and other high-intensity drug trafficking areas to make sure the federal resources can flow down to the local law enforcement agencies. I've got many Democrat, Republican, and independent endorsements. And you know what? We don't talk that much about being Republicans, independents, or Democrats. We talk about sidewalks. We talk about roads. We talk about the problems with not having water on our lands. We talk about the partnership that we have between the cities in the valley and the farms in the valley to get healthy, clean surface water, to stabilize the soils on the farm, improve the health in the rural communities, reduce valley fever and severe asthma, and solve the real problems. And we talk about the frustrations of governments that won't build the assets and the infrastructure we need, and how to get the money. $26 million last year in community projects, $60 million teed up this year in community projects, right down to the small communities that need these projects. I'm proud to be your congressman. I'm honored to be your congressman. I'd like to keep being your congressman. Please give me your vote.
Thank you. Our next closing statement is from Adam Gray. Adam, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Joe, the moderators, the sponsors, everyone for being in attendance tonight's important dialogue that we're having about a very important race. I'm going to close by saying I spent 10 years in Sacramento representing this community. And it was one of the great honors of my life. We did some incredible work, but we did it differently. We didn't do it by rubber stamping what the Democrat or the Republican Party wanted. We stood up and always put the Valley first. And I have that record. And that record shows that when we work together and we stand up for our community, we can build a medical school here in the Valley. We can pass an infrastructure act. We can build water projects. It's not always easy, and it never will be. It always takes hard work. But hard work is what Congress refuses to do because they're more interested in messaging bills and, press conferences at election time, and most importantly, always blaming the other party. It is easy to blame the other party. It is difficult to stand up and look inward and say, what can we do better as a party? How can I make the Democratic Party work harder for the Central Valley? And that's the kind of leadership we need in Washington. I worked hard for you every day that I was in Sacramento representing this community. I never put the Democratic Party before our community, and I won't do it in Washington, D.C. We have to send a message to Washington that politics, as usual, has to come to an end. You can't just say anything to win. You have to be honest in your leadership, and you have to actually show my record. And I'll tell you, don't take what John and I said tonight. We're both making our best case. Go look at our records. See what John has accomplished in 2 years in Congress. See what the leadership of his party has accomplished in the last 2 years in Congress. And look at what I did over 10 years in the state legislature. It was an honor to serve this community. I'm proud to be running to be your next Congress member, and I respectfully ask for your vote.
Thank you. So let's give our candidates a round of applause. Thank you all for joining us for tonight's debate between Adam Gray and John Duarte. It has been an enlightening evening, and we appreciate the candidates for sharing their insights and visions for California's 13th Congressional District. A special thanks to the Maddy Institute, UC Merced Cape, and Cap Radio for partnering with us to make this event possible, and to our moderators, Victor Patton, Kristen Lamb, and Brianna Vicari, for their thoughtful questions and guidance throughout the evening. Let's give them a round of applause. I also want to make a very special thank you to the James B. McClatchy Foundation and Susan McClatchy for the generous support of this debate through the All In for Democracy Fund. Without this support, this event would not have been possible. Let's give them a round of applause. As we wrap up, I want to remind everyone that your voice matters. With the election approaching, I encourage each of you to engage in the democratic process, educate yourselves on the candidates and issues, and make your voice heard at the polls. If you plan to vote by mail, remember that mail-in ballots must be postmarked by November 5th, and Election Day is also on November 5th. Thank you once again for being here tonight. We hope you found this debate informative and inspiring. Have a great evening. Thank you.